understanding the technology that powers the money is essential. Knowing the business drivers that inspire how the money is made is crucial. Bridging the gap between the mind of the technologist and the mind of the business is monumental. That is what TBF is all about. Let's start this never-ending conversation. It's time.
Happy Friday. We're back with another episode of the Tech Behind FinTech. My name is Nnamdi Oswago. I'm the host of the Tech Behind FinTech, and we have my guest today, returning guest, friend of the show, Chinwe Grace Jones, joining us from Trusted Teams. Today's topic is about culture. Pretty excited to discuss it. Let me get the read off the full title. Cultivating Culture, how team building shapes company success. We'll be focusing on a training aspect in this cultivating culture conversation. Before we get into the show and I introduce my guest, let me just do some housekeeping. We are streaming live from Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, and we also have a stream going from Instagram. If you want to be a part of the show, drop a comment in Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitch, and we'll add you to the show, and you'll be immortalized forever. If you're on Instagram, drop a comment or go to the website that's pinned, and you can be part of the live show, and we'll just read out your comment. Now, without further ado, Chinwe Grace Jones, how are you doing today?
I am doing well. How are you, Nnamdi?
Doing wonderful. It's like my second cup of coffee. I'm kind of like amped. And look, it's always a good time when you're on the show. Let me do you justice and read your wonderful bio so that people who haven't watched you previously can get a chance to know you, and then we're going to jump into the topic. Chinwe Grace Jones, a senior leadership and team development coach with over 2 decades of experience, has traversed the nation, igniting organizations to embrace a trust-first culture through dynamic and immersive workshops. As a former co-host of the highly insightful Leaders Fireside Chat podcast, she now ventures into a new chapter set to unveil her upcoming podcast, Trust Matters Now, Gateway to Excellence.
Thank you for that. Thank you. We still haven't launched that. Still looking for guests for that Trust Matters Now. So if anybody's interested in having conversations about trust, please do contact me. So we still haven't launched that podcast, but thank you so much for that introduction. Nice to be here. It's always interesting to come on a tech show and talk about something that's not as techy, but still important. So I'm excited.
Well, that's what we do here at Tech Behind FinTech. And I think some people I've approached sometimes say, oh, I'm not that technical. I'm like, look, it's the Tech Behind FinTech, but if you listen to the intro, we cover the business topics as well as the technical side. And the goal really is just to bring insightful information to our audience, the fintechs that listen to us, and those that are not as familiar with fintech who are trying to understand it, and even in some other verticals that these principles can still apply. You see, I think you're looking for guests. I had a joke. I was saying, maybe people have trust issues. That's why it's necessary guess.
That's a funny, but all we're doing is having a conversation about different experiences from your lens, from your role and your lens. How does trust matter to you, and why is it important? We're not really going to delve in and start finding trust issues with people. That's hilarious. No.
I think it's like an apprehension every time you talk about trust. And that it's interesting in from a security side, those that don't know, more on the security side of the fintech industry, that's one of the things that I do. But what a new dynamic of security which starts to play with is really trust, right? It's like when you're thinking about security, and especially you're looking at it from a fintech side, the goal is to build trust with your customers and also with your partners. So trust can be applied, but every time I think about a trust, I always think about that when I talk to you. So cultivating culture, it's one of those topics, especially when talking about culture. This is something that is it's always, I think people get confused sometimes with what exactly is culture. You
Yeah.
know, and from a hip hop standpoint, everybody always says, we're doing it for the culture, doing it for the culture. But from a company standpoint, what exactly is culture?
Yeah, and I really think that we shouldn't make it any different in a sense, right? You're talking about hip hop, but culture is culture. And from a company perspective, why it's so important is that it's basically that shared understanding of how we do things. How do we operate? How do we make decisions? How do we interact? How do we serve the customers? Like, what is our big how? And underlining that is also our why we do it this way, and really understanding those values that basically drive everything that we call quote unquote our culture.
And it's interesting because like one of the randomly I was reading a book this morning, or knowing me, probably listening to the book, and one of the topics came on about Zappos. And although the CEO, I know he passed away, but
Yeah.
one of his ethos that was so big was on culture, was on the customer service, was on how they treated the employees. Besides just selling shoes, that was like a really big part of the organization theme. I mean, I think, and I remember reading this a while ago. If you didn't really fit into their culture, they'll literally pay you to leave. They'll say, you know what, it's not working out. We'll give you money just to leave, because you're not really fitting into the culture. Like, what are your thoughts around?
No, that's funny that you mentioned that. That's one of the case studies that I always highlight when I do a workshop around culture, because I really, really love their story. I mean, they actually have a person in charge of really like that whole people culture, really cultivating it. And to that point, they were selling shoes, but they made their distinction in taking care of the customer. And they did that by first taking care of their people. And so if you take care of your people, if you're saying that we want to be a company that's about customer service from beginning to end, you have to make sure that the people that are going to be doing that knows, experience what is true customer service. And the best way to do that is to serve them, give them customer service so they can experience it, feel it, and understand it on what we want to do. And that's what Zappos did on a very high level. Rest the CEO's souls in peace. He really did a really good job in making that mission, and then not only saying the mission, but also understanding that you need a person to keep it going. You need a person that's gonna, um, have the flag to say, yes, this is my responsibility, and really start getting everybody around them to own it. So it was really good. Yeah, I like Zappos as a case study.
No, I mean, and in circling it back to fintechs, in some cases, you mentioned Zappos had this dedicated person that was their role. What if you don't have the resources to have that dedicated person, right?
Right.
Or, like, yeah,
Yeah, no, that's a great question, especially when for the companies that you deal with emerging fintechs. I think let's take a step back. Sometimes you don't really have to say, okay, I need that dedicated person, but doesn't mean that that dedicated person can't be doing something else. You need, in the situation when you don't have that many people, then you need to figure out how do you establish a space where you get everybody to kind of be accountable to it. But the first thing you have to do is really establish it. I think what happens at times, we just kind of hire people and then let them kind of dictate the culture instead of having the leader, the CEO or the COO saying, hey, these are our values, these are our culture, and this is what we're going to really be about. And it's not a one-time thing, right? It's a constant. So it's not, if you don't have that one person to be responsible for it, the question is, what do I need to do to start having everybody be responsible? Almost like everybody being everybody's keeper of this particular the culture.
I mean, it's interesting in talking about that. So one association I can make from my background in security, usually when you come to organizations, the security team is small percentage of people managing security versus the amount of employees you have. So it's a small team, or sometimes in really early stages, a non-existent team they may outsource. But the one thing that we say is security is everybody's responsibility, right? You have the team or the person managing it, right? But in the case of a insider threat, you get a phishing email that got through our necessary controls, and you just start clicking away. Right? I can't. What am I going to do? Like, you need to kind of be informed and trained on that. So I'm not. You're the culture expert, but would you agree with that association?
Definitely. I mean, you as a security team have a focus, and your driving mantra was everyone is responsible for security. Okay, you start there, but then what are you doing about it? You mentioned it. You have training. You have to inform them. You have to train them. What else, right? Because sometimes we get into this kind of thing where we're just sharing information instead of really allowing people to connect with it and own it and understand it. And I think that's sometimes the disconnect people have with whether it's culture or doing training of any type to kind of increase, whether it's increasing your culture or something else, is how do you make sure that people are buying into it and it's not a one-time event?
No, I like that, because in this information age that we live in, especially with social media, we're share happy. I mean, I share tons of information. I also consume tons of information, right? Sharing. Like, this is cool. I'm a constant sharer of health tips, cybersecurity tips, whatever. Like, if I see something interesting about, if you put your right shoe on before your left foot, studies show X, or I'm like, oh, that's interesting, I'm sharing. So I like what you said with, we're in a culture where we're sharing a lot of information, but how much of that information is actually being absorbed? How much of it is being owned? And I think that's a major point. And, like, what do you do in that situation?
Right. You take a moment to kind of figure out, okay, what is it? How do we first of all know who you're dealing with, right? Usually with teams, give people a space to kind of share what they're about, what their value, what's important to them. And then share the company culture and the values and help start. One of the things I don't see enough is helping people, especially leaders, guiding team members to make the connection of what's important to them to what's important to the company. Because when you make that connection, then it's like I come to work with a different kind of energy. I come to work with a different kind of understanding that I'm not just coming to do a job. I'm coming for something bigger, right? Whatever that mission is, and I connect with it, I believe in it because it kind of aligns with my values. I think that, even in interviews, one of the things, especially I would think tech people do, they focus so much on the technical aspect. They might have conversations like, okay, we got to see if they fit our culture, whatever they're in their head defining it. Sometimes if you don't defining it, everybody doesn't know what that is. But very rarely do we look at the softer skills, the softer understanding of the person, what the values of that person is. Does it connect well with our values to kind of make sure if it's a mesh?
So it's a lot that I want to unpack, right? That you said. I thought about this book about negotiations, right? In terms of, it was by author is Chris Voss, former FBI negotiator, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things he said is mirroring, right? In terms of, I'm actively listening to what you're saying, and then I'm now going to repeat in my own words what you said, so that I heard you. And I relate that to what you said in terms of CEOs and employees, and basically getting them somehow to, where are they going to make the connections? Sometimes what we see a lot is more so dictatorial, like, this is what we're doing. It's no feedback from the employees, like, okay, I'm getting the memo. Like, and it's interesting seeing that from CEOs to talk about culture, but it's like a one-way conversation. and they're not, you know, because, you know, at the end of the day, right? Look, I'm running this company, get on board or get off board. And, you know, it is what it is. So you see a lot of that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, how do they shift that dynamic?
In the sense of how do they shift instead of telling and really start to create a space to connect, right? You have to kind of, as a leader, you have to create space for that, right? So when you are saying, okay, these are our values, this is what we're sharing, this is what we want to move about, are you asking questions? What are your thoughts? What are your feelings? How do you see yourself in this, right? Like really creating space for this kind of dialogue and conversation. And then it might be to a point where you have to make an assessment, right? When you have new leadership and new things come, you can tell when things have shifted. And some people some employees will say, this doesn't feel right for me anymore. This is not the type of place I want to work in. So it goes both ways, right? But you definitely want to create a space, if you are a leader, to kind of hear from them and then hear what's important to them. Because sometimes people can't connect the dots, but maybe you as a leader can help them connect the dots. And so that's kind of what you want to do. Create that space for dialogue. So you're understanding what's important to them. You're sharing what's important to the company. And then somehow someone connecting the dots.
Okay, we have a comment. Hey, what's up? Have a good stream. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Yeah, let's put that back. So, you know, and you mentioned something else. You mentioned during tech interviews, you know, my career, I've done a lot of tech interviews, and you know, it's interesting, you know, in looking back at some. So sometimes you, depending on the level you're coming in, but some of my previous roles, like I talk to leadership, and we have the high level conversation about the business, got to get to know each other, tell some funny stories. I guess that is the part where we see, is not saying, okay, listen, here are questions on our culture. Do you match our culture? No, it's kind of just having that dialogue, right? Then they go through a part, they go, I'm going to check you out. We're cool. We're good. You know, I see you, you see me, you had a good conversation. I got a good vibe. I'm going to send you to my guy now. He's going to tech you out. And that's when the barrage of technical questions come. It's no culture related. It's a real, do you know, how would you go type this scenario? Do you know this program? You know, it's all those types of things. And it's interesting from looking at different interview practices. You know, what have you seen, or what are some tips that you could provide to help? You know, when, especially now, there's like I've read somewhere, not mainly a fintech, but big tech in general will include fintech, like 59,000 layoffs in the tech industry. So people are going to be interviewing. What are some tips that you can give from that side, from both sides, in terms of the culture and things of that nature?
Right. So I think let's start with the company side.
Okay.
From the company aspect of things, do they even know? Can they articulate what is their culture? Can they articulate it? Can they know what are the driving values? What are the driving characteristics? Because I think what you described, I think what it is, what people want to do in the interview is they want to fill you out, and in a sense, kind of say, can I work with this person? Right? It's really what they want to know. Like, can I work with this person? Am I right with working with this person? But I don't know if it's from, can this person connect to our ultimate mission and our values? Are their values aligned, right? And they might do some of that in asking certain questions. I'm not saying that all interviews, but I think as a company, you need to know and articulate what your values are. And then you need to know what type of characteristics kind of fall under those things that you've identified as your driving culture. And then what I've seen happen, and I know it's a little bit for some companies, what they've done is they've created, to help them, they've used tools like a behavior profile. Not that they give a behavior profile to each person, but they use a behavior profile to kind of create what are the type of candidates we're looking for. And based on that behavior profile, it generates questions to ask to kind of see if this person aligns or match, right? That's from the company side. And then from the employee side, I always think it's a good idea for you to kind of go and look at the website. They're usually the website companies always have their values. They might not follow it all the time, but they always have some kind of values or understanding. And then you have to ask yourself, how do you align with these values? And are there things that you can bring out and use case studies from your own experience to show that you do stand with these values, that you are aligned with these values when you're having that conversation? I think that would definitely, because I think for companies looking, they don't really want to look for someone that's just looking for a job. They want to look for someone that can kind of see their mission through their lens and own it with them. And the more that you can kind of show that in the interview, then that is something that will get their attention.
No, that's awesome advice. I was listening to somebody, I forget the exact name, but he's like a huge crypto trader, finance guy, and sometimes he said he does favors for people in which someone's interested in becoming a trader, and then they'll go to talk to him for a job. And then he'll ask a simple question like, all right, so one of your goals is to become a trader. What are some books that you've read on trading? They're like, none. And he's just like, come on, man, you wasted my time at this point. Like, you said you want to be something. This is what you got, through a referral, connection, a friend, or whatever. You got to sit down with me. I'm like close to a billionaire, and you can't tell me a single book you've read on that particular subject. So it sounds like a huge disconnect. Like you basically just got the meeting because of who you knew, but nothing based on what you're trying to do in life. Like,
right. And what you just gave is a great example of just having a simple question. And to me, what I heard in that simple question is, this man, he's looking for people that have a growth mindset. He's looking for people that are constantly evolving, going deeper, curious learners, so just with that simple question, and that's really what you need when you're doing these kind of interviews for company leaders, is to understand first, what are those driving values and characteristics that you're looking for? That's really what is going to help continue cultivating our culture here. And then find out what those simple questions that were going to determine that. And that's a perfect, excellent question that keeps it simple, but also determines, okay, this person doesn't have a growth mindset. And in our culture, we are all about continuous learning. So it won't be a good fit.
And just like that, you just missed the opportunity of a lifetime. See, that's so crazy, because it's those little, I love how you made that connection. I absolutely love it, because it's hard to ask someone, do you have a growth mindset? Of course I have a growth mindset.
Exactly. No, you're looking for the proof. That's why I said you have to give reference to your own professional thing, about not just saying, oh, you go to the website and say, yeah, I have these values. No, you have to put reference on how you actually live these values. Because that's what you're doing in the culture. That's what everyone in the company, when you're talking, you want everyone to be living the culture, not just reading about it, not just listening, but you want them to represent it and live it.
I love that connection. So many light bulbs just went off, because with that example, right, he asked a simple question: what books have you read on this particular subject that you want to get into? The response is none. But that question, if the culture is about a growth mindset, that question just totally X this candidate out. You don't have a growth mindset. Wait, why would you say I don't have a growth mindset? Of course I do. No, you don't. Like, you want to get into this thing. You're not taking necessary steps to learn it offline. You're not growing. You don't have a growth mindset. It's like, wow.
And to be fair, because I don't want companies going out and having that one question and cutting people. To be fair, you might want to take another question, right? You want to say, well, what is the last workshop you've taken, or what audiobooks, if because everybody is different now. Everybody's consuming information. You started off in saying, knowing me, I probably listened to the book versus reading the book. And sometimes people are literal in questions. So I just want to make sure that we're not just taking that one question and saying, okay, try to have some a little bit follow-up just to kind of confirm your understanding.
And to be, my earlier quote, in terms of the reading, I do read it. I just know that, like, when I'm up, I've been waking up really early these days to start my exercise routine. And what has been happening is I've just been consuming these books or Blinkist books, like, while I'm getting ready, preparing. And it's just like multiple things going on, but I'm just absorbing some information and getting ready for, like, the run or jujitsu or yoga or whatever. So that's why I said it at that particular time. It's definitely listening to it. Yeah, no, that's very, very, very interesting. I'm now curious to what other examples of simple questions a person can ask or a company can ask, and it can kind of be a telltale sign for other aspects of their culture. And it's just real subtle.
You just mentioned health, right? And all the things you just mentioned, all the things you do health-wise. I mean, another question, if it's important for people's work-life balance. In your last job, tell me about, how much vacation you took or the vacations you took, right? And maybe they're saying, no, I didn't take vacations, or how, what do you do for lunch, right? Those little things about trying to understand maybe work-life balance. Is this person a big proponent of work-life balance? Asking questions around those type of things just to kind of find their experience.
The interesting thing is, like, the immediate, because it's so being on that side, right? In terms of I'm you're recently laid off and you're actively looking for work, and someone now you have this opportunity, and someone said, okay, like, wait, with work-life balance, you don't want to get the wrong answer. You're like, wait, I don't know if they just want to, like, if they're a company that grinds like 50, 60 hours a week. So I don't want to say the wrong thing. But so it's interesting that those types of questions.
But you say that, and I think that we need to start looking. And I know we went on a whole different conversation, but it's all good. But I think we need to.
It's show, man. All good. So
it's all good. I think we need to start looking at interviews as a two-way opportunity, because this whole thing with mental wellness. If you're not if you believe in work-life balance and you're not a person that wants to work 60 hours, then you want to be honest about what you're about, because you're not going to last, right? So it's culture on both ends. You have your own set of ways that you want to connect and work in an organization. So you need to be asking questions also for your own well-being, because you don't want to ever put yourself in a situation. And I understand you might have been recently laid off, but you don't want to ever put your situation where now you're miserable, even though you have a job. I mean, that's not the best.
My Cobra is about to run out. Depending on that health insurance.
Have you ever been in a job where you're miserable? It's not a good feeling. It's not a good feeling. I'm just saying, it's not a good feeling.
It's about to run out. Mortgage is due. Kids' private school tuition to due. It's getting kind of steep. You're telling me that it's a two-way conversation. I just really need this opportunity,
It is a two-way conversation. I would want you to take it as a two-way conversation. And the thing about it is, I'm a believer, and maybe it's, but I'm a believer that your position is out there. You just have to focus in. I mean, as you go and you do doing your own interview process, again, you should be you should have your own set of values and what you're looking for. And you should be searching in that aspect and not just searching for anything that has your title on it, but searching in a holistic manner of, is this a company that's a good fit for what I'm about? Because the fits, if you try to do these things on both ends and you get people that are not a good fit, it doesn't last. It's not sustainable. And that's ultimately what you want. On the company side, recruitment costs a lot of money. So you want to retain your people. And that's one of the things they say is that when you have a distinct company culture, your retention rate goes up. I think they said company strong cultures have seen a reduction in turnover about 34%. I don't know if that's from Gallup or so, but you do see when you are matching, and we're talking about this interview process, when you're intentional and looking and asking those questions to make sure this person's a fit for your culture, and then they come in and then you also build a strong culture, it gives them, and they believe in it, it gives them a sense of belonging. It gives them a sense of connection, a sense of pride, and they are going to work better on those things, a sense of clarity. All these things that you get when you have a strong culture makes it easier for the people to do what they need to do for your company and to really go above and beyond.
So now shifting back to the company, right? Like what sometimes the clarity aspect of that, I want to know, what's the difference between the culture and the mission?
Right. A culture, again, is how we do it. A mission is what we do, right? So it's a culture is how we go about doing it. So a lot of things that when you want to really empower a person in their own, especially now where everything could be hybrid, somebody could be in their own thing. You want to ask yourself when you're in doing work for your company, there might be unexpected things that happen. We expect those things and we have to make a decision or we have to contact somebody. How do you go about doing what is the intangible, the unstated rules of how we operate in the company? So for instance, maybe, this company is all about failing fast and they're wondering about doing something and they're saying, you know what, we're all about failing fast. Let me do it. Find out what the results of is going to fail. So they're more apt to do risk taking and take risk on different things instead of asking for permission, right? And so these type of ways, when I'm talking about a sense of clarity on how you move on your own, when you know what the culture is and it's strong enough that it's very clear.
No, that makes sense. So,
and I'll give you another example. Back in my tech days, my other life. So we had this whole thing when I was a coder, we had this whole thing. It's all about beautiful code, beautiful code. Let's write beautiful code. And beautiful code had a couple of things that we knew what that looked like. It was about making sure you had comments on different processes, making sure that you had the variables were like clean, like that you had, if you were going to use this variable over and over again, then make it a global variable. Don't keep on doing. So there were certain things. And we expected everybody to follow this. And so when someone is out and now you have to go and help debug somebody's code, let me tell you how crazy it was when I would go into someone's code and didn't see what I expected. Didn't have any comments, didn't have any variables, were all over the place. I had to now figure out what they were doing instead of fixing what I needed to fix. You see what I'm saying? So that's right there's a wasted time. So that's what I mean about, like, just imagine if everybody was following the beautiful code. Go in and then you fix what you have to fix and you get out. You spend less time trying to figure it out. I hope that analogy makes sense. I know I went way back to my tech days, but I hope that made sense.
It makes a lot of sense. In what, trust me, I identify, because I always talk about this. Like back then, we used to code in Perl, and when we made the shift to Python, and I hated this. Like I hated Perl because for some reason, everyone who coded in it thought it was really cool to do it their own way and make it as complicated as possible. And I thought it made, I mean, yeah, we spend the next few hours to figure it out, but dude, you're not cool doing that, right? Like when I used to code in it, I used to put so many different comments because I'm like, I'm going to forget this. So I put it more for myself. So I have to go back to it. I can easily say, oh, this is what it's done. No one else would do that. And not only that, they would just go, yeah, that's why when we shifted more to Python, especially for what I was doing, it was just way better and just a little easier to understand. So I get it, but you just had me reminiscing about stuff when you brought it up. But the one thing I want to say is what it sounds like is standards. You had standards of this is, in your example, this is how we code. This is the structure. These are the standards that are in place. So if everyone meets these standards, we're all aligned. So with culture, is it like that? Is it more so, here are our standards, here are our expectations?
I think that standards are a little bit more rigid in sense of versus culture, where culture, I mean, you think about what you just said earlier about security. Culture is like these driving values of how we go about doing things, but it doesn't have to be, it's not as rigid as line by line, but it kind of gives you a guide, right? This is how we operate. Okay. And so for your thing was security, everyone is responsible. This is how we operate. And so in knowing that security, so it's like, to me, it's like these driving values that dictate how we make decisions, how we interact, how we communicate, but it's not line by line that you would get like an SOP from a client or anything. No, that's not how how culture is usually presented.
Okay, understandable. So if we're focusing on the training aspect of culture, how does that now come into play?
Well, I think that it's one thing to say this is our culture, these are the values that drive us, this is how we want to operate. Then the next thing is to actually now to let everyone else in on that, right? And with training, you get to not only share, because I think that sometimes we just use training as a thing to share information. In training, you get an environment now to have those discussions that I was talking about, to have dialogue, but also to help people understand it, to help people become aware of it. So they're expanding their awareness and why it matters. I think that we don't answer that question enough. Why does it matter? Why is it important? Right? Why is it important for the company? Why is it important for you? Why is it important for us as a collective? So in training, you get to not only to expand the awareness, you get to expand the understanding, but then you could do things, right? And activities and exercises that now you get to start to help people start to own it a little bit more on their own. So it's not just about just sharing information, but allowing them, giving them opportunities to experience, to understand it, then experience it so they can start owning it.
One example in my wow, so it's it's so cool that this whole so I've been I just restarted binging on these books and just going in on just various different things. And what's happening now is I'm having all this information in back of my head, and I'm just running with it, right? And I don't necessarily, it doesn't come up in conversation, sometimes. But now that we're talking, all this stuff that I've been reading about is now coming in, and I love it because I wasn't necessarily doing it for this show. I was just doing it from my own growth mindset. So, Deloitte, right? The firm, hundreds of employees, right? And all across, consultants all around. And one of the things is, they approach, whether you're dealing with a client or in Texas or Nebraska or New York or Chicago or whatever, all run the same way. And I was reading this morning, they have something called Deloitte University, right? And which, just a quick Google search, right? What does Deloitte University do? Deloitte University is one of our most visible and tangible investments in our people, a cornerstone of our culture. More than a physical location, DU is a place that brings to life our strategy, purpose, and shared values through a powerful selection of immersive development experiences. And I think that's like right in line with what you're talking about.
Right. And Deloitte believes in strong culture. They also, there was a survey point in here that I had too with them that they said too with people, according to Deloitte, 94% of executives and 88% of employees believe a distinct workplace culture is important to business success. So it's not only that you're just doing this for a company. Again, the employees want to feel a certain connection to the company, because when you don't have that culture, I feel like there's a level of disconnection, that everybody's doing their own thing. There's no pride in how we do things. Think similar to when you think about an ethnic culture. When you think about things within an ethnic culture, there's a pride you take, there's a connection, there's a belonging, and that's the same thing that gets created with a company. But it's interesting that it's not that far away. You have the executives saying 94%, and you have the employees saying 88%. So we're kind of aligned that everybody is saying that a distinct work culture is important to business success. And like I said, it gives that sense of clarity on a lot of different things, especially to empower the individual person to make decisions.
So right now we got to take a brief moment for our sponsor, but then I want to come back and I want to discuss, right? These are like Deloitte, obviously a huge firm, a lot of resources. How do you take that same thing and distill it to the smaller fintech? Well,
Sure.
we're going to come back and talk about that. We're going to take a brief moment for our sponsors and we'll be right back.
Are you an emerging fintech with a limited budget seeking more sales and partners? Introducing Strategic Generation, your partner in leveraging cybersecurity for sales and partner enablement. Fintechs often lose opportunities due to unsophisticated cybersecurity programs. That's where we come in. Strategic Generation assists with due diligence, security posture visibility, penetration testing, and on-demand virtual CISO services. We connect your systems to our partnered platform, and voila! Instant access to real-time diagnostics and compliance frameworks such as SOC 2 and PCI DSS. Gain the confidence of prospects and partners. Strengthen your cybersecurity program and drive success. Stop losing deals due to cybersecurity. Visit strategicgeneration.com and click on Demand CISO to connect with an expert.
Just like that, we are back. So, one of the things we were talking about prior to the break, we talk about Deloitte University, tons of resources that people go through. They get trained on all these things about their culture. Everyone's doing the same thing, no matter where you go to globally, with that particular firm. So, how does a smaller emerging fintech or with less resources, with maybe a team of 1 to 20, or even, as they start to scale up from to 50 and 100, but how do they implement certain those types of practices?
Right. I think the first thing you have to do is you have to start in the sense of understanding what's important to us. I think it's so funny. I think these smaller firms already do it, but they do it from the external side and not the internal side. And what I mean by that is that when these fintechs are building their applications and their solutions, their business solutions, they have in mind the type of target client they want. They have in mind the values that their program that is going to align with the person that's going to say yes to their solution. They have these type of things already in mind, and they're creating, in their essence, they're creating their solution to cater to a certain type of persons with a certain type of values. Wouldn't you say that?
Their avatar.
Yeah, their avatar, right? And so you do all of this work to serve this avatar. So you have to ask yourself, usually I like, you talk about mirror, I like to be a reflection. Just going back to the Zappos thing, they want it to be a reflection of great customer service. So you can go backwards and say, if you're building this solution for your customer, this means that these values must be important to you. Now, how do we start to spread that? How do we start to have these conversations to increase people's understanding and awareness that this is what we're about? And you have to be intentional, right? So you have to start, you have to establish it, you have to be intentional. And then there's simple things. You don't have to always have to do the bigger things. There's simple things you could do. We were just talking about book reading. You can have like a book of a month and make sure it's something that drives our value and have people read that book and then discuss it. You can have little training sessions or do online sessions. You can do different things, but the thing with the online sessions, you can curate, right? There's a lot of different things out there for free. You can curate what makes sense for your particular company, what values you want to drive. I think the key is start, be intentional, and then continue. Don't just stop. It's not a one-time thing. So there's a variety of things you can do to keep on driving home that this is our culture, but not only driving it home, but making sure you look at your environment, look at the way you do things, and really kind of assess, take a real good assessment and saying, okay, we do it this way. Is this aligned or in conflict of our culture? Maybe we need to shift the way we're doing something here. Maybe the way we onboard people, the way we interview people. We're talking about interviewing. How are we interviewing? If we're saying that we want people that are fun, happy, and then we have interviewing them and we interview them in a very serious way, that's in conflict, right? And so you want to make sure that you're really assessing everything that you're doing in the lens of, is it in alignment or in conflict of our culture that we're trying to create and cultivate?
You know what? And it's so interesting because that's a huge jewel that you just dropped. It's like you're working with different organizations, for over 2 decades now, right? We're building this thing, no matter what that thing is, whether it's at a big investment bank, been there, whether it's at a small fintech, been there, right? But the rare thing that I'm thinking through is, and I don't really see it or was it as intentional, is we have this avatar. These are the things that we're trying to build. This is what we're building for this app. These are the benefits that our system is going to provide. This is what we're telling our customers or clients or partners or whatever. But are we taking those same ethos internally? And that is a huge gap that because obviously everybody wants to make sales, get money, but these same things that we're saying, are we taking those same things and redoing those things internally? Wow. Huge gap. Not to drop names, but huge.
But that's what Zappos did, right? That's exactly what they did. They wanted to be all about customer service. They knew they were selling shoes. They wanted to be all about customer service, and they started internally. They said, how can we be the best customer service to our employees? So you can always take the bigger companies or the rising companies and kind of look at some of the things that they're doing, right? If you want innovation, because that's a big thing. And I read this article, they had 10 case studies of FinTech, and they said the FinTechs thrive. Their simple lead to success is simplicity, agility, user focus, with that avatar again, and ethical considerations. And they did a case study on like 10, like Stripe, Chime, and it was on from Digital Defined, or I think that's what it's called, Defined. And what they're saying is that they looked at all of these people, that's what helped them with success: the simplicity, agility, user focus. Okay, and we know that, right? In the fintech world is like, how can we be fast? How can we be agile? How can we keep things simple so the cost can keep? So you have to ask yourself, okay, I just mentioned some things that are key to success. If that is your set of values, if that's what you want to build your culture around, then you have to ask yourself, are you doing things? Are you keeping things simple, right? You can't say simplicity for the solution you're creating, but then it takes 10 steps for someone to put in for vacation, right? So you have to ask yourself, how are we living these values in everything that we do?
Mind blown. That's the one right there. Like when we look at it's so awesome that it's coming towards the end of the show, because that's the one. That is the one. I love it. Like, because now for me, right, as a person who talks to fintechs, works with them, so forth, right, this is a whole other barrier of the conversation that I'm going to now include in my dialogue. I absolutely love it, because, just haven't thought about it like that.
Right. And I want to add to that, because you said something like, as you talk to fintechs and work to fintechs, and I think that's the other thing for these emerging fintechs, they don't sometimes have a full team. Sometimes they're working with contractors. Sometimes they're working with vendors. The same thing you would apply to someone you're hiring is the same thing you should apply to your vendors and your contractors. You don't usually hear people ask, they might go to the website, but they don't ask and see, are these vendors really living their values? What are their values? Do they mesh up with our values, right? They're really focused on, can they do the job? Have they done it before? But they're not focused on what type of vendors and contractors are we saying yes and bringing into our company. Because you have to treat your vendors and contractors the same way you would actually employees, right? And I think that sometimes with the smaller firms, they say all these things that we're talking about, well, I only have 2 employees, it's not apply to me. But what does it look like when you start to apply it to the collection of people that are working on your solution? How powerful can that be, that everybody's on the same page, that everybody is kind of moving in this kind of shared how?
Scared. I always say this, man. This show, I really been doing it for like this is the 4th year right now, and my goal for starting it was for like conversations like this, just to enlighten me, give me another perspective I didn't think about. I try to do a good job in anticipating what an audience will have a question on, to like because with some of the terms, so I try to ask that on their behalf. But I love shows when I'm even like, wow, that's such an interesting perspective. Wow, this could be, like, especially like, because I focus a lot on the tech, and we can get deep in that, like MLOps and DevSecOps and security and blah 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 blah. Right? It's good to have these types of conversations, because it's like, that is such a good perspective. I mean, that is the jewel right there, is what we're building. These are the things that our application, our service is about. Are we espousing those same values internally, right? And I know that we're after business and stuff, but are we doing so? If we're big on analyzing data that a client will give us, and then we sort through this data to provide them insights that they didn't know, are we taking those same types of steps internally? Maybe when we, from our security perspective, or when we release stuff, can we easily get the information that we need to make decisions on different aspects? Because this is what we're building. Why aren't we doing those same things internally? I mean, when you start thinking about it like that, it can go in a myriad of directions.
And I think that when you live, and I think when you live that, like how you described it, I think when you start living the values that you're driving for your avatar, this innovation comes in a different way. You have the experience of it, and then you have more ideas come, and there's just a movement around it, because now it's not just that you're talking about it, and it's not just that you're building it for someone else, but you're actually living it. And it's a whole different experience in the way you see things and think about things as it pertains to that solution you're building for your avatar.
I just feel like I owe you money. You just trained me on culture. So much.
So it's a really snapshot. But here's the other thing too. I wanted, because I do know that the conversation always comes about, we don't have the budget or the time, because everything has to be fast. And I think that, going back to that example I shared with my coding, I think you have to ask yourself, when are you going to invest in that time or the money? Are you going to invest up front to kind of make sure that it's structured, to make sure that we're all on the same page? Are you going to invest in the long run in mistakes, fines, regulatory fines, or all these other things that happen when you don't have that shared understanding of how we move? Because like you were talking about earlier about these phishing things, you can talk about security is everybody's responsibility, but if I truly don't understand and know and been trained on it, and I click on it, that's going to cost the company money. And so we just kind of looked at this cybersecurity awareness training as like a little check mark and did it, but really didn't go deeper to make sure people understood the impact of it. And now we're paying for it later. So I do believe that this conversation that sometimes smaller companies have about budget and time, I always want to say, when do you want to invest? And how do you want to go about investing? And do you want to invest intentionally in the beginning, or do you want to just feel it in the mistakes, the breaches, the regulatory fines, and stuff like that?
So, I mean, my last question, and it's a line of what you said, and I want to dive into this. And then after this question and you answer it, I'm going to give you the platform to talk about trusted teams and so forth. My last question is this: based on what you just said, we have something in technology we call technical debt, right? And you accumulate technical debt when you keep kicking the bucket. So that means, okay, are we thinking about putting security in when we're designing our requirements so that we can start looking at it from a shift left perspective and build security all throughout the software development lifecycle? Or are we going to ignore it? And then are we going to just implement security when the application is live, which studies have shown the cost then dramatically rises, right? So because you accumulated all this technical debt. I mean, that's not only with security, it could be with performance, it could be with a myriad of things. That's an example. Is there something similar to cultural debt?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, that's a good one. I don't know. That's a really interesting. There might be. Yeah, there might. Go ahead. I didn't hear you. I'm sorry.
When you start introducing the culture early on, you see innovation happens, like what you said. That culture.
That would be very interesting. I know I ran down a book about like big projects and be surprised about how many big projects fail. Like it was like they had the different industries, and IT was like one of the worst industries in ever, having projects come on time and on budget. But it'll be interesting because I was really interested with that book. It'd be interesting for me to delve a little bit deeper in that book to see if they talk a little bit about culture, but I don't think so. But it'll be interesting to see. But that's the closest I can see where they really start to track how well people are able to like bring their projects to close. But yeah, that'll be interesting. You have me thinking now, and I want to go do some search and see if there's something like that. I don't know if anybody's tracked it or what it looked like or anything. So that's interesting.
Hey, maybe you go get that domain, cultural debt. You just came
Say that again.
Maybe you get that domain, cultural debt.
And start making it happen and do my own research. Yes.
Look, on that note, as brilliant show and what we do for our guests, we just started doing this, I don't know, 10 episodes ago. We give you the platform to talk about trusted teams, how people can find you, and anything that you want to promote or say. So with that note, I'm going to hop off and let you do.
Hi, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Tech Behind FinTech. Again, my name is Chinwe Grace Jones. I'm the CEO of Trusted Teams. And what we do is we help organizations really elevate their team members from all levels through workshops and training and coaching. And one of the things that we are been really interested right now is really looking at increasing the amount of attention put on the frontline staff, the frontline teams. And what I mean by that is really building their leadership character so that they are operating or speaking the same language as the people that are leading them. And we do that in a program called Hire, takemyteamhire.com. And this is something that we really believe can be a game changer in organizations. When we start putting more into our frontline teams, they're going to give more to us. So thank you again for listening. Thank you for having me on TBF.
Thank you. I'm trying to so what we try to do is we're going to add that to the show right now. Let me just put your name, Chinwe Grace Jones, and what I would do is takemyteamhire.com, add it to the comment section, and then right here, so people can. Now it's in the show forever. Like I always say, people, whether you've watched the show live, whether you're going to watch it tomorrow, whether you're going to watch it next year, I thank you in advance for viewing it. I thank you for the behind the scenes DMs, the likes. I even thank you just for the watching it and so forth. Really appreciate your viewership. That's what keeps us going at Tech Behind FinTech. You go on our website, techbehindfintech.com. You can subscribe. We'll be putting out weekly fintech news, so you can have your finger on the pulse of what's going on in the industry and so forth. And you get to our newsletter, you'll get that every week and so forth. So go on the website, and subscribe. Let me put that URL in the comments real quick. Put that in the comments so you can see it. Check FinTech. Subscribe. That in the comments. You subscribe to second. Boom, right there. Tech Behind FinTech, subscribe so you can have the pulse on the latest show, our guest. Also, you'll start getting news of the week so you can have your fingers on the pulse of the industry and what's going on. That said, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us once again.
Thank you for having me. Great conversation.
Oh, excellent conversation. Have a wonderful weekend.
You do the same.
On that note, to everyone else, have a spectacular weekend, and we are out.
Take care.
Understanding the technology that powers the money is essential. Knowing the business drivers that inspire how the money is made is crucial. Bridging the gap between the mind of the technologist and the mind of the business is monumental. That is what TBF is all about. Let's start this never-ending conversation. It's time.